Is Jaya Govinda Das. It's spelled with a J-A-Y-A, separate word, Govinda, G-O-V-I-N-D-A, and Das, D-A-S-A. The A at the end of Das is silent. And the definition is, Jaya means victory or glories. Govinda is the name of Krishna, which means one who gives pleasure to the senses and to the cows. And it's not that I'm Krishna or God, so therefore we put Das on the end, which means servant of. So I'm a servant of God, basically.
Excellent. So we'll go straight in. So this year marks 50 years of ISKCON. Can you explain a little bit about Vedic culture?
ISKCON, I'll first explain a little bit about ISKCON, because it's probably something that people aren't so familiar with the term ISKCON. ISKCON is commonly known as the Hare Krishna movement. ISKCON means International Society for Krishna Consciousness. It was founded in 1966 by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada. He's the founder. In 1965, he came to New York. He had a free ticket on a steamship to New York. And he came at the age of 70. He was in what is known as the renounced order, the sannyas order. And he came on the order, or the request of his own spiritual master, who is representing a whole ancient line of gurus coming down going thousands of years, to bring this Krishna consciousness to the Western English-speaking world for the first time in a missionary spirit. So this is it is a milestone year because 50 years is quite significant. It's a half a century. And the Vedic culture, Veda means knowledge. And so knowledge, just like when you have something, there's always knowledge about this something. And the Vedas are very in-depth knowledge of all of creation, who the creator is, and goes into a lot of details about how the cosmos works, how creation works, how to live and act within the creation so people can live comfortably and peacefully, and at the end of this life, ultimately, to go back to the spiritual world, because this place is a temporary place, based on the fact that the foundation is that we're a spirit soul. This is Vedic culture, understanding that it's a culture of the soul. It's a spiritual culture. It's a very refined culture. Understanding that the body is not who we are, but we're actually the soul. We're the driver, the self. And the objective of life is to come to realize, become self-realized, understand that you're an eternal spirit soul, that we don't actually belong in this temporary material world where there's repeated birth, death, old age, disease, so on and so forth. And to go back to the spiritual world, go back to where we came from. Kingdom of God, as the Christians call it, heaven, spiritual realm, Vaikuntha, etc. There's so many different terms according to one's understanding of the terms.
So who began this ISKCON movement 50 years ago?
Well, ISKCON was started, as I mentioned, by Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada. But it's not, the society was established, but the culture and the knowledge. He's representing a long tradition, spiritual tradition, of guru to disciple, going back thousands of years.
And then how has this movement grown within the 50 years?
Initially, this was a movement of full-time monks in training, especially in the 60s, mid-60s to late 70s, early 80s. But since, the movement has grown in a different way. Now, the monkhood or full-time practitioners are not so many, in the sense that now people are taking it up in the lay world. Regular people are becoming connected to Krishna consciousness and practicing the principles and becoming interested in this spiritual science and becoming practitioners of the spiritual science.
Now, many people can kind of associate this movement with kind of a hippie movement. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the reason that is is that when Bhaktivedanta Swami came, the youth at the time were known as hippies. It comes from the term hipster, and they were a little bit disenfranchised with the materialistic life that they had been growing up with their their parents, the 2 cars, and so on. They realized that there has to be more to life, and the hippie lifestyle. Interesting enough, there were a lot of them were seekers, and the hippie lifestyle, the long hair and the beards, they were trying to actually emulate the sages of the East, the sages of India. So they took on that dress, although they were completely misguided. And a lot of the so-called sages are misguiding as well. And when Bhaktivedanta Swami came and introduced Krishna Consciousness, the youth at the time, because youth are open to new ideas. When you go to a university, you don't see old people there. You see the youth. Their intelligence is inquisitive. They're ripe for trying to understand and expand their understanding of life. So this was the initial following that Bhaktivedanta Swami had, and therefore it appeared that they were actually hippies. But most of the hippies were actually just youth, because practically at that time all the youth were identified with that lifestyle, that style, and it was a style of seeking, looking for more knowledge, looking for something different than just materialistic life that they had were growing and being accustomed to.
Okay, then following that kind of talking about the youth, how important do you think it is to have a cultural identity, especially now in this?
The real identity, to have a cultural identity, there are various cultures. Cultures are usually conditioned. At one time, there was actually a global culture. There was one culture, and we can see the similarities in all cultures. There are still some similarities. For instance, the concept of a marriage, the concept of a funeral and death, the concept of a social order. In the European, it was called the feudal system. In Asia, it's called the Varnashram system. And in the Aboriginal cultures, they also have their chieftains and their warriors and their gatherers. And so there's definitely some similarities in all cultures. And if you look at languages, you look at the etymological languages, you'll see that there's similarities from different languages, different words, indicating a common source. Linguistics, those who study languages, they understand that they come to understand that Sanskrit is the original language, and all the Vedas are actually written in Sanskrit.
Do you think this generation has a strong cultural identity then, and
Usually the cultural identity, everyone's looking for an identity. That's a good point. They're looking for identity. That's why people take up the fashions that they do. And usually, once again, it's the youth. They take up, formerly it was the punks. I'm not sure what it is now. And then, before that was the hippies, and before that was the zoot suiters, and before that it was, on and on and on. It's just the nature of youth. They want to create an identity. But their identity is always being misdirected because they're identifying with this temporary body. So real culture means to understand your real identity as a spirit soul. And the Vedic culture, the Hare Krishna culture, is based on that we're not the body, but we're actually an eternal spirit soul, part and parcel of the Supreme Soul.
Okay. Do you think Vancouver is really receptive to ISKCON?
Vancouver is a very multicultural, very open-minded place, and ISKCON has been around for a long time. I know initially when we first came here, we get a lot of catcalling and jeering if we would go and chant on the streets. But now when we go to different events, and the Hare Krishnas are there, people embrace us. They come to recognize us. They know us. You know, we've been in Vancouver since 1968. We're 2 years shy of 50 years in Vancouver. So even though the movement itself is 50 years old, so people are, you know, pretty open for the most part.
Do you think that initial reception was due to how Hare Krishna is kind of depicted in movies and in Hollywood?
Well, usually this is what happens. Initially, when something is new and people are a little strange to people, their first reaction, there's two reactions. Generally, the first reaction is one of joking, you know, something funny, to laugh. But then the next thing is to actually become a little bit defensive, what it is. And sometimes that defensiveness can come out in the form of aggression. But then later, after some time, again, it turns to actual understanding and friendship. That people become friendly and acknowledgeable and accepting.
So my next question is, what does the future look like for ISKCON?
The future is very bright. And the reason I say that is because this whole movement, interesting enough, has been prophesized. Bhaktivedanta Swami has been prophesized. He's been prophesized in the ancient Srimad Bhagavatam, which is a 5,000-year-old scripture, prophesizing this person. And 500 years previously, he was prophesized that there would be someone that would come and spread the chanting of Hare Krishna all over the world, which he did single-handedly in the course of 12 years, from the age of 70 until he passed away 12 years later, early 80s. His age, early 80s. And you know, there are many, many sources of prophesizing. So it's also prophesized that this movement will continue to grow, and that more and more people will take to it, and it'll actually cause a golden age within the present age of Kali, which is right now is the age of Kali. It's a degraded age, and we can see there's a lot of movement going on in that direction that can be directly related to the Hare Krishna movement. For instance, vegetarianism is very, very commonplace. Animal rights, people are becoming more conscientious of animal rights, and you know, people are becoming more open to higher ideologies. So this is actually indicative that the things are going in the right direction. But at the same time, one may argue that actually things are getting worse, and in another sense they are. You just have to open up a newspaper and see what kind of, you know, horrific crimes are taking place. So what seems to be taking place right now is there's a polarization. On the one side, things are becoming more positive, and on the other side, things are becoming more negative. And usually when there's a polarization, something gives. And usually when something gives, again, because of prophecy, what will give will be that the righteous will stand supreme. Morality. There's always been that plurality. There's always been that diametric contest or competition between divine and, for lack of a better term, demoniac. Mm-hmm. And divine always ends up running supreme because people are getting very frustrated. You know, they're very frustrated with the way society is. They're very frustrated the way you know, the direction that society is going.
So then how is ISKCON kind of addressing the problems of society?
Well, the problem of society, how are they addressing the problems of society? If people could just understand one simple factor, that they're not the temporary body, and that happiness does not come from just trying to pamper the body, but actually happiness comes from satisfying the driver of the body, the soul. And if people can just understand that one simple principle, that the soul is permanent and the body is temporary, then the idea of you only live once, let me enjoy as much as I can, or by hook or by crook, let me be happy. Doesn't matter what I do because there's no reaction, there's no, you know, there's nothing that I have to be accountable for. And but if they actually just understand that. Now, it's not a matter of just intellectual understanding. It's a matter, people can actually genuinely realize and perceive that. Because this is a spiritual science. It's a science of the soul. It's a spiritual science. And like any science, you start with a hypothesis. You're not the body, you're spirit, soul. You support the hypothesis. The body's changing from childhood to youth to old age. You know, there's so many other supports that give it some substance and some logic and reason. But then there has to be a process. It's not just intellectual, there has to be a process of understanding. And that's where yoga comes in. And this particular yoga is known as bhakti yoga. And when you apply the process of bhakti yoga, then you can actually come to understand and realize it to be a genuine reality and not just some intellectual. Just like in an experiment, you have your hypothesis that if you mix this chemical with this chemical, you get a certain reaction. That's the hypothesis. But until you go into the lab and you mix the chemicals, you're not going to get the realization. And when you do mix the chemicals, then you get the realization. And it's the same with the science of Bhakti Yoga. So if people understand that and people put it into practice, just even a little bit, the whole course of society and civilization can change for the better.
Should ISKCON have a stronger voice then in politics and in making change within the laws of society?
Yes, if I mean ISKCON, you can say ISKCON, ISKCON or not ISKCON, if this knowledge is accepted by the leaders, then society, because the leader is responsible for the direction of society, and if the leaders can understand the actual purpose of human life and actually be able to help the citizens, the praja of their country to go forward in this way, then that's proper position of a leader. And right now there are people in government positions that are actually Hare Krishna devotees that people may not even be aware. So there is a lot of headway being made in this way. I don't need to go. I won't go into any examples, but
Okay.
take it as fact,
Yeah, I will.
as truth. And it's not difficult to find out who they are.
Yeah, exactly. Has there been any challenges or conflicts within the last 50 years?
Oh, absolutely. There's always challenges, and challenges are almost it's almost like a good thing, or conflicts are almost a good thing, because it indicates and shows that you're making some progress. There's always going to be some reaction when anything that is different that goes against what is accepted in the norm. For instance, things that we advocate to help us understand that we're not this body is that we follow a vegetarian diet. So when you promote that in a society that's based on a carnivorous diet, meat-eating diet, then you're going to meet with resistance. We also advocate no illicit sex. And when you're advocating that to a society that's their ultimate objective, I mean, I shouldn't say illicit sex is their ultimate objective, but it's a very common thing, illicit sex, intoxication. These things right now are government supported. Grade A beef, BC Liquor Board. Now they're promoting legalization of cannabis, marijuana. So when you are saying that these things are counterproductive for raising your consciousness, and I don't mean like a marijuana high, where people think that they're becoming enlightened. Not that kind of enhanced awareness, but an awareness of you know, a more refined, because we don't need intoxication. We're being intoxicated at every moment. Every time you go through a checkout stand in the grocery store, your eyes are being intoxicated by, you know, so many different magazines with all these things. Every time you turn on a radio, turn on a TV, no offense, being a broadcaster to be, but that's actually the case. There's already enough intoxication, so we don't need to have more, which just dulls the consciousness. So when you promote these things in a society that is basically living on that, you know, that's their lifestyle, then naturally you're going to meet with resistance and opposition. So sometimes the approach, especially in the earlier days, the approach was very perhaps overzealous, and instead of being more tactful, as we learn to be when we're a little more mature. So there's more resistance previously than there is, let's say, now.
So you're seeing a more welcoming of people to ISKCON and to this movement, and people, you know, wanting to know more?
The youth especially, they're very, very curious. But we have senior citizens coming who've never, you know, they have tours, and or sometimes on their tour route. And you know, just a few weeks back we had a group of senior citizens come, and you know, they were very appreciative and very open to what we had to say. And then we regularly have high schools and colleges, and also colleges from different faiths. Christian faith colleges come, and we receive a lot of appreciation from the professors, from the teachers, from the students, from the seniors, from all walks of life. So this is a good way. It said if you want to test if the pot of rice is cooked, you take 1 grain, and if it's cooked, then you know the whole thing. So this is a good way to test it. When you see people come out of curiosity and they go away, a little more understanding and in a very happy, pleasant, appreciative mood, then you can see society is accepting.
Has there been any shocking reactions from people coming here and learning more?
Not recently, no. No.
Not recently, but previously?
You're skipping
Oh.
out. You're skipping out.
Can you lock it? Yes. Sometimes, yeah. As I mentioned, there's always going to be a reaction. When something is new, something is strange, there's always people that are going to be fearful. That's just the way some people are. That they just fear something that's new and different. And when there's fear, often fear turns into some kind of an aggression, either verbally or even physically.
Okay, that's all the questions that I have, but if there's anything that you would like to add.
It's very important that society gets back on track, because right now it's on a royal road to destruction, and if people can just come to understand that they are not their body but they're a spirit soul, and try to understand how to nourish the soul, learn about developing their spiritual awareness, the spiritual consciousness. It doesn't matter what particular faith one is, but if one strictly follows, and when I say strictly follows, I mean follows their faith not in a concocted way, but in an actual, according to their Shastra, not making something up, then society can, get put back on track.
I do have another question.
Okay.
People are so attached to their material belongings, and you say that society is obviously going down a destructive path. How do you kind of tell people to disconnect from everything and kind of concentrate on their spiritual being?
It's not a matter of falsely renouncing material things. understand that, where the material things come from, and and realizing that you're not actually the owner, and that everything is temporary except us. The constitution of everybody is that we're eternal, and we're full of happiness, bliss. We're searching for that. The problem is that we're identifying with something that's temporary, and we're always experiencing unhappiness. So, the simple analogy that we always use is the driver in the car. The driver is the important thing. If the driver identifies with the car and his constitution is to enjoy, then he's just going to focus on enjoying through his car, making sure that his car is nicely maintained and better wax on the hood, etc., etc. But he neglects himself. He's not going to be satisfied, no matter how big, how expensive, how nice, how many custom things he's added to his car. He's not going to be satisfied. But when he realizes that his nourishment is different than gasoline, and he starts to feed himself, then he doesn't become overly infatuated with his vehicle. But at the same time, he still maintains it because it's a tool that is necessary. In a sense, in the analogy sense, the allegorical sense. The body's necessary, so we take care of it, but we don't become overly infatuated by it.
And now this movement believes in reincarnation. Can you maybe just talk a little bit about that briefly?
Reincarnation. Actually, there's a Christian term for reincarnation, which means refleshing. And we're reincarnating right in front of our eyes. In fact, it's proven that every 7 years we have a different body. Every cell, every molecule is different. So we're actually reincarnating right in front of our eyes. So we go from childhood to youth to old age, and then what happens? We die. The body dies, but the soul continues. And the idea of reincarnation is according to your activities, your karma, according to your pious and impious credits, you acquire another body. And that body can be, you can have a better birth or you can have a lesser birth. Just like, for instance, your car wears out and now you need to go and buy a new car. So there's two deciding factors: what kind of car you're going to get, how much you can afford, and what you want. Everybody wants top of the line Lexus, but they can only afford a bottom of the line Lexus.
Yeah.
So it kind of works like that. But the idea is that we don't actually want to take birth again. We don't want to be in the material world and take birth again and go through the anxieties and the inconveniences of getting old and disease and rebirth again and going through the cycle, because we don't belong in the material world. There's a spiritual world. We're a spiritual being, and the spiritual world is full of variegatedness, much more variety than in this material world. And to give up the material consciousness, develop spiritual consciousness, and then giving up this body, go back to the spiritual the spiritual realm, and at the same time, recognize your spiritual existence in itself.
So that's what everyone's working towards, is going to a higher spiritual.
That's the objective. But the journey is always. It's not something that we live in a hope for the future. It's something that we're experiencing on a day-to-day basis, and that experience just becomes more and more pleasurable, we become more and more aware.
I like that. Okay, well, that is all that I have. Thank you for taking the time to speak to me and answer a few of my questions.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to answer your questions.
Thank you.